They always told me my birth mother died the day I was born. For 26 years, I lived with that grief, framed by the cold, flawless stepmother my father married just a year later. But last Tuesday, everything shattered. My parents suddenly demanded my younger half-sister drive across the state to my apartment just to take a picture of my front door. They claimed it was for an insurance policy, but the panic in my father's voice screamed otherwise. When my sister arrived, she didn't just snap a photo of the wood grain, she caught the reflection in the glass. Standing right behind her on the pavement was a woman with my exact eyes, my exact jawline, and a scar on her left cheek that matched an old family photograph. It was the woman they called dead. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Emily, and at 26 years old, I've spent my entire life trying to fill a void shaped like a person I never knew. Growing up in a grand, echoing house in the suburbs of Seattle, the narrative was always the same. My birth mother, Sarah, had tragically passed away due to complications the exact day I entered this world. Her memory was a forbidden zone, completely swept under the rug just a year later when my father remarried. My stepmother, Eleanor, was a woman of pristine, chilling perfection. She didn't tolerate mistakes, and she certainly didn't tolerate the ghost of the woman who came before her. Every childhood drawing I made, every milestone I hit, was evaluated under her cold, critical gaze. I was constantly reminded of how grateful I should be that she chose to raise me as her own. The only piece of my true history I possessed was a single, faded wedding photograph of my mother that I'd managed to smuggle out of a dusty box in the attic when I was 10. I kept it taped to the underside of my dresser, staring at her warm eyes and the faint, crescent-shaped scar on her left cheek whenever the loneliness became too heavy to bear. Eventually, Eleanor and my father had a child of their own, my half-sister, Maya. Now 19, Maya was sweet but incredibly naive, completely sheltered from the harsh manipulation that I had faced daily. I moved out the moment I turned 18 to build a quiet life as a graphic designer, putting distance between myself and the toxic dynamics of my childhood home. Yet, no matter how far I ran, the heavy, suffocating shadow of the mother they called dead always seemed to follow me, waiting for the day the truth would finally surface. It happened on a completely ordinary Tuesday evening. I was wrapped in a blanket on my sofa, reviewing design mock-ups on my laptop, when my phone began to vibrate violently against the coffee table. The caller ID displayed my father's name. We rarely spoke on weekdays, and almost never without Eleanor on the line, so a knot of unease immediately tightened in my chest. When I answered, his voice lacked its usual commanding, stoic composure. Instead, he sounded frantic, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Emily," he practically gasped, completely skipping any polite greetings. "Where is Maya right now? Is she with you?" I explained that Maya was visiting a college campus just 20 minutes away from my apartment, but I hadn't seen her yet. He let out a sharp, tense breath that sounded dangerously like panic. "Good. Listen to me very carefully. I need you to call her right now. Tell her to drive over to your building immediately." I frowned, completely baffled by the sudden urgency. "Dad, what's going on? Why does Maya need to come here?" There was a muffled rustle on the line, and I could hear Eleanor's sharp voice whispering frantically in the background. My father cleared his throat, trying desperately to smooth over his tone, but the cracks were obvious. "It's a corporate property insurance audit, Chloe. The underwriters require a high-resolution, time-stamped photograph of your front door and apartment number tonight to verify your residency for the family trust. Don't ask questions, just have her take the picture and text it to us instantly." The excuse was flimsy, bizarre, and entirely uncharacteristic. My father was a meticulous corporate man. He didn't do frantic nighttime scrambles over a simple door photo. Something was terribly wrong. The text message from Maya arrived exactly 40 minutes later. I had been called back into the office for an emergency server update, so I wasn't even home when she reached my building. Her text read, "Got the photo for Dad. Heading to a coffee shop nearby to study, love you." Attached was a high-resolution, crystal-clear image of my apartment door, the brass number 4B gleaming under the harsh fluorescent hallway lights. Relieved that my father's bizarre request was fulfilled, I pinched my fingers on the screen to zoom in, checking to make sure the apartment number was fully legible before forwarding it to him. But as my fingers expanded the image, my heart violently skipped a beat. The polished wood of my door acted like a dark mirror, catching the reflection of the hallway window directly behind where Maya had been standing. In the reflection, standing just a few feet away in the shadows of the stairwell, was a woman. She was in her mid-50s, dressed in a faded trench coat, her eyes locked onto Maya with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I zoomed in further, the pixels stretching, but the facial structure was unmistakable. It was the exact high cheekbones, the exact deep-set, sorrowful eyes that I had stared at beneath my dresser for 16 years. And then, my breath completely caught in my throat. Faint but visible in the sharp lighting was a distinct, crescent-shaped scar resting on her left cheek. It was an identical match to the hidden wedding photograph. My hands began to shake so violently that I almost dropped my phone onto the office floor. The woman my father had buried in stories 26 years ago wasn't a ghost. She was standing in my hallway. A cold, primal panic seized me. I immediately called Maya, my voice trembling as I ordered her to get into her car, lock the doors, and drive away from my neighborhood as fast as possible. Once she confirmed she was safe, I threw my laptop into my bag and practically ran to the parking garage. As I started my car, my mind raced with a million terrifying questions. If my mother was alive, why had they lied to me? And more importantly, how did my father know she would be at my door tonight? I knew calling my father would only net me more lies, so I dialed the only person who might actually give me answers, my maternal aunt Sylvia. We hadn't spoken since I was a child because Eleanor had strictly forbidden any contact with my mother's side of the family. When Sylvia answered, her voice was laced with shock. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Aunt Sylvia, I just saw a photo of my mother," I blurted out, tears stinging my eyes. "She's alive. Tell me the truth, right now." A heavy, suffocating silence filled the line, followed by a shaky, broken sob. Under the crushing weight of my confrontation, Sylvia finally broke down. She confessed a dark secret that shattered my entire reality. Sarah hadn't died of medical complications. 25 years ago, she had uncovered evidence that my father and Eleanor were running a massive financial fraud scheme through the family business. To silence her, they used their wealth and influence to forge medical documents, framing her as mentally unstable and having her institutionalized under a false name. When Sarah finally escaped a year later, she went into hiding, fleeing for her life. My tires screeched as I pulled into my apartment's parking lot, my heart hammering against my ribs. I scrambled out of the car, my eyes scanning the dimly lit courtyard. There, sitting quietly on a concrete bench near the entrance, was the woman from the photograph. Up close, the resemblance was staggering. Seeing her in the flesh felt like staring into a mirror that predicted my own future. As my footsteps echoed on the pavement, she stood up slowly, her hands trembling in the pockets of her worn trench coat. When our eyes met, a profound, silent understanding passed between us. Tears welled in her deep-set eyes, and she whispered my name with a voice that sounded like a long-forgotten lullaby. "Emily, you look just like I imagined." We sat together in the quiet shadows of the courtyard as she revealed the missing pieces of the puzzle. Sarah explained that she had spent 2 decades looking over her shoulder, moving from town to town to stay ahead of my father's reach. She had only broken her silence now because she discovered a terrifying truth. A massive legacy trust, established by my paternal grandfather, was set to mature on my 26th birthday. My father and Eleanor couldn't access the millions tied up in it without Sarah's official, government-issued death certificate. Because she was alive, they were legally trapped. They had spent weeks tracking her down, and when they realized she had located my city, they panicked. The frantic command to send Maya to photograph my front door wasn't an insurance audit at all. It was a calculated scouting mission to see if Sarah had already made contact with me. Hearing the depth of their cruelty, a cold, sharp anger burned away my fear. My father and Eleanor hadn't just stolen my mother. They were actively trying to erase her existence all over again just to line their pockets. I looked at Sarah, then down at my phone, realizing we held the ultimate leverage. Together, we formulated a plan to turn their own game against them. I called Maya first, explaining the truth in a gentle but firm voice. She was horrified, her illusions of her perfect parents shattering instantly, but she bravely agreed to help. Next, I called my father back. I kept my voice perfectly casual, masking the adrenaline rushing through my veins. "Hey, Dad," I said smoothly. Maya sent the photo, but the lighting was terrible and the apartment number was completely blurred out. The building manager said the underwriters won't accept it. "Why don't you and Eleanor drive up tomorrow morning? We can fix this insurance issue together, and I'll sign whatever trust documents you need." Hooked by the promise of the millions within their grasp, he swallowed the bait without a second thought. "We'll be there at 9 sharp, Emily," he replied, his voice dripping with triumphant satisfaction. They arrived the next morning, walking into my apartment with smug, arrogant smiles, confident they had cornered me. Eleanor even brought a sleek leather folder containing the fraudulent paperwork. But as the door clicked shut behind them, their smiles vanished. Sitting at my dining table, flanked by Maya and James Mitchell, the private investigator Sarah had secretly retained, was the woman they had claimed was dead for 26 years. Before they could speak, I pressed record on my phone. The silence in the room was absolute as my father and Eleanor stared at the ghost from their past. Eleanor dropped her leather folder, the documents spilling across the floor like autumn leaves. Faced with Sarah's living presence, Maya's tears, and the undeniable evidence of their decades-old financial fraud, their arrogant facade crumbled completely. They were trapped, and they knew it. James Mitchell calmly laid out our terms. "Sign over my rightful legacy trust unconditionally and walk away, or face immediate criminal prosecution for fraud, forgery, and elder abuse." With my phone recording their every word, they had no cards left to play. Trembling with a mixture of rage and defeat, my father took the pen and signed the papers. They left my apartment completely ruined, stripped of their power and their stolen wealth. 3 months later, I used a portion of my inheritance to buy a beautiful, sunlit home on the coast, far away from the toxic shadows of Seattle. Maya moved in with me, completely severing ties with her parents to forge her own path. Best of all, the empty void in my life is finally gone. Every morning, I sit on the porch, drinking coffee alongside the mother I thought I'd lost forever, celebrating the beautiful future we are building together. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you discovered your family's biggest tragedy was actually a lie? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving 2 other incredible stories on the screen that will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching.